In 1972, EMD introduced the sequel to the relatively unsuccessful SD38 in the debut of the Dash 2 line. The SD38-2 did mildly worse than the original, selling only 83 total units until 1979. Very few Class 1 railroads purchased units, and smaller short lines that specialized in heavy hauling or ore service picked up a few examples, but still low numbers. ScaleTrains announced production of the EMD SD38-2 in November of 2021, and models arrived stateside in December 2022. The initial announcement included a diverse group of 6 road names and 26 road numbers, but issues with production led to the return of most of the units. The only models that were not delayed were the EJ&E and Frisco for a total of 9 road numbers. The MSRP is slightly over $350, but the standard ScaleTrains discount brings this total to $285 for sound and DCC units. The model that we will be taking a look at today is EJ&E657. This model features a unique orange patch out in the standard EJ&E livery. 657 is one of the 13 SD38-2s for the J and one of the first wave featuring early style details. Checking out the details on the front of the cab, the first of these is the high-mounted LED headlight in the golden white color on the top of the brow of the locomotive. On either side of the headlight are the backlit number boards, also LEDs, as well as the golden white color with the unit number on the front. Just below the brow are the cab windows with the etched metal windshield wipers left in their bare metal finish for a nice metallic look. Moving down to the nose of the cab, on the top portion of the nose are some of the separately applied grab iron details, as well as the sand dome hatch for the front of the sanding lines. On the front of the cab are more of the SD38-2 lighting features, and the LED tricolor class lights are no different. On the conductor side of the front hood is the ratchet-style handbrake, and the front is finished off with the treaded surface on all the walkways of the unit. Continuing the analysis on the front-end details, the handrail stanchions are molded in a single plastic orange base color and have yellow accent painting where the handrails connect to the side sill. Also mounted on top of the anti-climber is the MU receptacle that allows communication between 2 locomotives on the prototype. The front of the anti-climber also supports the drop-down platform to allow crew personnel to easily change locomotives, and while this piece does look like it's able to be folded up in an upright position, it is fairly stiff in the down position. On the front face of the lower sill is more of the standard-looking features like the coupler cut bar, molded in a single yellow piece. Separately applied metal grab irons also sport the front and painted yellow to match the coupler cut bar. 2 sets of 3 air hoses are on either side of the coupler. These separately applied plastic components are molded in black and have silver accent painting for the glad hands. The brown painted coupler is a ScaleTrains semi-scale die-cast coupler with the weed whack front snowplow mounted at the very bottom, given its name for its relatively low profile shape. Moving down the side of the unit, one of the first features that catches the eye is the black framed all-weather side windows. This separately applied detail is an EJ&E road-specific detail and adds character to the cab. The diesel is mounted on 2 EMD HTC trucks painted in the metallic silver. These trucks are a little unique from other HTC trucks in the fact that they have 3 brake cylinders, 1 for each axle, and this is another EJ&E road-specific detail, despite most SD38-2s opting for this feature. Just above the side sill is the molded-on brake chain details with associated spring details above the rear 2 axles. The center axle on the truck has the early-style axle snubber for a better ride and stability on the prototype. On the extreme ends of the truck are these separately applied plastic sanding lines, with the first axle having the speed recorder mounted to the bearing cover. This model is a little different from other ScaleTrains releases where the prototype opted for the axle bearing caps for added protection, and thus rotating roller bearing caps are not correct and not found on this model. The cab side view is finished off with a glance at the mechanical bell just behind the truck. Panning back for a better view of the overall conductor side of the long hood, the main spotting feature for the long hood is the dynamic brake intake grills with the molded-on plastic grill detail work that looks like an etched metal component. The dynamic hatch is removable and allows easy access to the DCC decoder for maintenance or swapping out the decoder. Of typical 1970s fashion, this locomotive was produced with the ACI car track placard, giving a nice contrast to the J orange base coat. Unlike the dynamic hatch, the radiator intake grills are an etched metal component featuring the chicken wire style slotting. Like most SD38-2s, the unit features dual air tank receivers, with one on the engineer side and the other on the conductor side as shown here. On the front of the fuel tank, one of the conductor side only fuel details is the addition of the overfill fuel pipe that dumps fuel onto the track in case of overfilling. While on the conductor side, we'll point out the vast array of undersill piping and plumbing that continues down the entire side of the locomotive. And while the side profile is up, it is a good chance to take a look at some of the smallest details found in this locomotive, and that is the metal lift rings found on the top. The rear of the locomotive is fairly standard. The top is mounted with the horizontal LED rear light, once again in the warm white color. Just below the light is the backlit number boards, and the final lighting feature is more of the LED tricolor class lights that cycle between white, green, and red. The left side of the rear is fitted with these separately applied metal grab irons giving access to the roof of the locomotive. Below the sill are more standard details with the coupler cut bar molded in the single yellow plastic piece. The air hoses are molded in black plastic with the silver glad hand accent painting. Matching the front, the rear is fitted with the ScaleTrains die-cast semi-scale coupler in the semi-scale draft gear box. One of the major road-specific details is the addition of the rear-facing weed whacker plow, while most SD38-2 owners opted for the traditional no rear plow. The engineer side of the long hood is pretty similar to the conductor's. One main spotting feature is the radiator water sight glass window in the door panels, giving a nice black contrast again against that sea of orange. As mentioned earlier, this side does have its own air tank just above the fuel tank with more of the air system components. The two air filters are situated just behind the front truck. These Salem filters are the accordion style. Just below the filters and the main tank is a good amount of plumbing details, generally molded in fine plastic. And tucked up under the sill is the ground light housing between the second and third axle. This component is a visual aspect only, with the actual LED light tucked up behind the housing. The engineer's side also has a little bit more of the fuel tank details. The EJ&E units opted for the 3,200 gallon fuel tanks over the 4,000 gallon versions found on the SP examples. These smaller fuel tanks give some extra space after the front truck. Both sides of the fuel tank offer the vertical fuel gauge, while the engineer's side has the round dial gauge option as well. Both sides have the fuel filler ports with the red accent painting, and the emergency fuel cutoff switch is mounted into the side sill along with some red accent painting too. The top of the locomotive has the best feature found on this model, and that is the LED gyro light rotary beacon on the locomotive brow. This lighting feature increases and decreases in intensity to give the illusion of a rotating lighting feature, and honestly, it looks pretty awesome. The top of the cab is also fitted with the firecracker style antenna in the black color. Continuing down, the model does feature the two exhaust ports from the prime mover. These ports are on either side of the dual dynamic brake exhaust fans, with the fan blades on the inside and the etched metal grille on top. The model is fitted with the Leslie RS3LR horn, and this separately applied component is a brass feature. Due to the smaller horsepower output from the SD38-2s, the radiator cooling requirements were also lower, and thus only 2 radiator fans were needed compared to the SD40's 3-fan versions. This matches the dynamic brake with the fan blade details on the inside and etched metal grills on top. The rear is finished off with the separately applied top grab iron and rear sandfill hatch dome on the very edge. The underside is nicely detailed as well, with most of the details having already been mentioned. One detail to check out is the see-through etched metal side steps on all 4 corners of the model. The actual LED lights for the ground lights can be seen here too, near the housing detail. The model shell can be removed by removing the 2 screws from the coupler boxes, removing the boxes, and then the shell can be pulled apart from the chassis. This model features a lot of extra details, so extra care should be used when opening the model, especially around the sanding lines that wrap around other details and may be prone to breaking. The interior of the model is similar to other ScaleTrains locomotives and is jam-packed with equipment. The prime mover is the ScaleTrains motor with the 5-pole skew-wound armature and dual brass flywheel for better low-speed performance. The model features all-wheel drive and all-wheel electrical pickup, providing the motor with electricity. The center of the interior is fitted with 2 circuit boards. The larger green one is the lighting board for the model and features the 21-pin DCC socket, and the smaller blue one is the ESU V5 decoder with lock sound. The decoder also has the ESU power pack with 2 supercapacitors to maintain power over dirty track. The sound system under the radiator section has a dual sugar cube speaker setup and can operate on DC or DCC layouts. But enough talking, we'll go ahead and fire this up and go through the startup sequence and check out the major features on this ESU V5 decoder. weight of the locomotive is 18.38 ounces, or 521 grams. For comparison, the ScaleTrains SD40-2 weighs barely above at 18.7 ounces, or 530 grams. For the pull test, 3 attempts were made and the average was taken, which was 3.77 ounces, or about 107 grams. Given this, the model should be able to pull about 45 to 50 average size freight cars with no grade. The coupler heights were also compared to the Katy height gauge, and it was found that both ends were slightly low. For the scoring section of the review, the score will be broken down into several categories, each with its own point total, adding up to 100 possible points. The model comes in the standard ScaleTrains packaging with hard plastic outer shell and soft plastic liner. The basic quick start guide and other additional information is provided. Exploded parts diagram is supposed to be available on the website, but at the time of video production was not yet available. The accuracy of the model is actually pretty good for the designed era of the late 70s to the mid 80s. The notable changes for the J units had an orange painted beacon cap that was lost sometime before 1988, and the handrails were delivered without the safety yellow but was added sometime after 1976. The paint on the model is pretty sharp. The EJ&E orange is a good shade and covers well. The decals are also sharp and crisp too. There was some minor paint chips or missing portions on the finer details, so I did take away 1 point. The details section is basically perfect. ScaleTrains added a megaton of details into this model, and it's essentially a work of art. Almost every detail is very well done and finely produced with a good selection of metal and plastic components. I really like how ScaleTrains added details that would never really be seen by modelers while the locomotive is on the track, but people know and expect them to be there. The motor and electronics are very solid. The prime mover and drive mechanism are known very well for a while from ScaleTrains, and the SD38-2 is no exception. The LED lights are well done, and the tricolor class lights are a great feature too. That being said, the backlit number boards are subpar with a lot of light bleed. The metal wheels provide good tractive force and electrical pickup, and the trucks are highly detailed with good molded on and separately applied details. The ScaleTrains brand semi-scale die-cast metal couplers are also found on the front and rear of the locomotive, but were both found slightly low. The value of the model is always subjective, and with a relatively higher price at $285 after discounts, this model is no exception. But in my opinion, the model is a great performing locomotive that sounds great and looks amazing as well, and is really on par for the price point. Just some other minor opinions. The overall look of this model is very nice. There are some few minor issues like the paint on the rotary beacon, as well as some minor paint chipping on the handrails. I think the worst thing about this model is the backlit number boards that are probably going to need some work after this video is over. Tallying up all the points gives a 94 out of 100, or a solid A rating. And when comparing this model to recently reviewed models, the ScaleTrains SD38-2 winds up third on the list. Overall, a pretty good placement for the 38-2 and well-deserved, with a very solid chassis, drivetrain, followed up by a well-performing sound system, and finished off with as many details jammed in there as could be expected. I think the ScaleTrains release gives similar vibes to modelers who have purchased ScaleTrains before and should expect the same performance from this unit. I found this model to be almost identical to the SD40-2, sharing a similar frame size and internals. Personally, I will be looking forward for other units that were sent back to the factory, as well as the additional and more modern rebuilt units to be added to the current fleet, and would recommend the ScaleTrains SD38-2 model to any mid-1970s to current modeler. But let me know what you guys think about this partial release from ScaleTrains, if you're going to be picking up the J or Frisco units, or if you're just going to be waiting for the other half of the release to be returned from repairs. But that's all I got from you guys this time. Comment, rate, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.